welcome to this ANSYS SpaceClaim tutorial on basic draft. Today we're going to learn 3 different techniques for adding draft to this part. But before we get started, we'll need to use the draft analysis tool to help identify which faces need to be drafted. Let's find that tool by going to the Measure tab and clicking on Draft in the Quality group. Let's go ahead and box select the part. We'll notice the gray arrow pointing in the up direction, and by default, SpaceClaim will choose a direction that's parallel to the z-axis. If we want to change the direction, we can click on the tool guide on the left side, or as you can see, press the Alt button as a shortcut key on our keyboard. Now let's look at the Options panel on the left, and we'll see that the direction specified is set to 1. Although we have an option for both, we're going to look at how we can keep the direction set to 1 and still analyze the draft on both sides of this model. Next, we'll look at the Angle section. Here we're able to click in the box and specify a minimum angle, or we can use the Scale slider bar on the right. Let's go ahead and use the Scale slider bar and click the plus sign 2 times with our mouse button. We've now specified a minimum draft angle of 2 degrees, and if we look on the model, it's now color-coded green and red. Green means positive and does not require draft, but red means negative and does require draft. And we're going to need to make sure these faces are green in order for this part to be able to be removed properly from the mold. Click once in whitespace to exit out of the draft selection. Go to the Design tab, and let's add draft to our first set of faces. Click on the Pull tool and select the light brown faces on the top side. Now we can manually select these one by one, or we can double click and select all 8 faces at the same time. The reason I'm able to do this is because these faces are tangent continuous. There are rounds at every edge corner. Next, we can click on the Draft Tool Guide here, or we can press and hold the Alt button to specify a drafting plane. Let's go ahead and press and hold the Alt button and select the top face here as our drafting plane. Now you'll notice that the Pull tool is actually hinging on these upper edges, as well as my pull arrows are now curved. So if I left mouse click and drag up or down, I can see the draft dynamically happening on the model. Let's go ahead and set a draft of 2 degrees. You can also do this by typing in 2 in the dialog box and hitting enter on your keyboard. Before we continue, let's check to make sure these faces meet the minimum required draft of 2 degrees. Click once in whitespace, go back to the Measure tab and reactivate the Draft tool. Box select the model, and those faces here are now green. Let's rotate the model and look on the bottom side. We'll need to go ahead and flip the draft direction. To do that, press and hold the Alt button and select a new face to measure the draft about. Let's select the top face on the cylindrical part of the model. Here we see that we have outside faces as well as inside faces that need to be drafted. Click once in whitespace, go to the Design tab, and reactivate the Pull tool. Let's go ahead and select all the light blue faces. Double-clicking on the outside face selects all the outside blue faces. Press and hold the Control button on your keyboard, double-click the inside pocket faces, as well as the inside cylindrical face. We should have 17 faces selected. Now, press and hold the Alt button and select the drafting plane. We'll go ahead and select the face on top of the cylinder. Now what you'll see is, if we zoom in, for faces that don't actually intersect the top drafting plane, SpaceClaim will extend these virtual edges, and this is actually where these faces will be actually drafting from. Let's take a look at what that would look like. Move your cursor to the white area, click and drag upward and downward, and you'll see the cylindrical faces on the left are fixed about the top drafting plane. However, The vertical faces on the right, the edges are moving. They're not fixed. So let's go ahead and make sure those are fixed by pressing and holding the Alt button on our keyboard, as well as pressing and holding the Control button. And let's double click on the outside edge loop, double click on the inside edge loop, and then the outside and inside edges of the cylinder. Once we do that, let's go ahead and now click and drag downward to add the draft that we need. You'll notice now the edges are fixed and the faces are drafting appropriately. Once you set it to 2 degrees, let's double check our work by looking at the draft analysis tool again. Click once in white space, zoom out a little bit so the part is centered about the design space. Click on the measure tab, click on the draft tool, and box select. Press and hold the Alt button, specify the top face on the cylinder part, and now you'll see that those faces are now green. The only other faces we have now to check are these faces here that are in the center of the model. Click once in white space, and let's also click on the Home button over here to the left in the Orient group. This resets the view for us in the design space. Now what we need is a parting line in order to appropriately draft this face so that we split half for the top and half for the bottom. The best way to do this is to use a tool called Mid-Surface. To activate the Mid-Surface tool, let's go to the Prepare tab, and we'll find the Mid-Surface tool in the Analysis group. Here, we're instructed to select a pair of offset faces. All face pairs on the body with the same offset will be detected. So if we click on this top face here, notice that Spacelame automatically shows a offset face below. And if we click on that, then it highlights the top face is blue and the bottom face is green, indicating that these faces have the same offset throughout. Now, what we'll need to do is hit the checkbox to complete the mid-surface creation. When we do that, you'll notice the model is temporarily put in transparent mode, and we have a mid-surface being shown here at the center. Click once in white space, and let's actually go back to the Design tab, click the Select button, and double-click the inside edge loop. We'll use the Fill tool to remove that hole, and then we'll use the Pull tool to offset the edges of this particular surface. Double-click on the edge surrounding the model, and all the edges will be selected. Click and drag to the left on the arrow, approximately 0.2 inches. Once we've done that, we can now click once in white space and check the box for the solid to turn it back on. We now see our parting surface conveniently located right in the center of these pink faces. So now, let's actually double-click the pink faces. Let's press and hold the Alt button and double-click on the mid-surface. And then now, we'll take a look again at the Options panel, and we'll see here that we have the ability to draft default side. And if you want to see which side is default, it's best to look directly into the model, left click on your mouse and drag upward and downward. So we see here that the default side is on the upper side of the mid-surface. Now if we click on Draft Other Side and test this out, we'll see that the faces being drafted are on the bottom side of the mid-surface. But what we'd like to do here is actually draft both faces. So let's go ahead and click on Draft Both Sides, and let's click and drag up and down. So now we can see that the draft is being created appropriately about the center mid-surface. So let's go ahead and set it to a draft of +2 degrees. Click once in white space to exit. And let's double check to make sure we've got all the draft correctly created. Uncheck the box for mid-surface. Click on the Measure tab, click the Draft tool, and Box Select. We now see the upper half of the center section painted green, as well as all the upper faces selected green. And if we rotate and we press and hold the Alt button and choose a new draft direction, we now see that the bottom half of these side faces are green, as well as all these bottom faces are green. So this indicates that we've placed all the draft appropriately on the model, and this model is ready to go to manufacturing. This concludes our video. Thank you for watching.